Hello everyone, welcome to this ITT and NQT training session on whole school literacy. There's an actual CPD session next Monday, if you're watching this on the day, on our own literacy policies. This one's just going to be a more general overview of what you can think about in terms of reading, writing and speaking skills in your own subject areas. The vast majority of the research and the materials from this presentation are taken from the EEF, the Education Endowment Foundation. If you don't already know about the EEF, it's a brilliant resource online for, they basically collate a lot of research and a lot of data into easily accessible, easily manageable bits and pieces that basically tell you what to do as a teacher. So that's really quite useful. It's a nice little tool to have in your arsenal. So as I said, today we'll be focusing on reading, writing and speaking skills. Firstly, I want to talk about reading. Here we've got written a snapshot of a lesson. This might be typical of some form times or some lessons. I'll give you a few seconds to read this, or you might want to pause the video just to let yourself read it for a second. So there are some positives and negatives to this sort of experience that some pupils have in school. On the plus side, this kind of activity, the reading in form time of any sort of text, can provide structure and routine to a day. It can also increase a pupil's cultural capital, their knowledge of different bits and pieces within life, within literature. However, these sorts of reading occasions are not subject specific, and as this teacher, as the form tutor has rightly identified, we're not always sure that all pupils are reading when they're given silent reading sessions like this. So that although this is one way to increase literacy around the school, it's not quite the thing that we want to aim at as classroom teachers. So instead, we need to focus on something called disciplinary literacy. And this is a way of approaching reading skills in particular as subject specific areas. So rather than just focus on reading as just this general, you need to learn how to read sort of skill, we break down those skills into reading skills that are specific to our subject area. You need to think about the very small ways in which it impacts at question level, in exams and things like that, and obviously in our day-to-day classroom practice. James Perry, when he spoke last week about some of the teaching principles for the school moving forward, he talked about the curse of knowledge, and I think reading skills are very much something that the curse of knowledge applies to. We as teachers can often take for granted our ability to look at things like command words, things like the difference between the word explain and the word define, or something like whether or not we need to consider the author of a text. We can take these skills for granted, but these are actually skills that pupils need to be taught explicitly. So we're just going to have a look at a few different examples of how that can look in different subjects. So in scientific subjects, for example, you're going to do quite a lot of reading, and this reading will be taken at face value. You won't really have to consider the author of a text when you consider your textbooks and things like that in science. But as an English teacher myself, it's very hard for me not to look at the author of a text and see them as a thing to be studied in their own right. What were their thoughts and feelings? What were their experiences? And that's simply not the case in other subjects. You've then got your, like I said, command words. I know the maths department a couple of years ago spent quite a lot of time thinking about how they were going to explicitly teach their command words when it came to the longer questions in the GCSE maths exam that some students just weren't engaging with. So really it's down to you as subject teachers to explore how to best approach the skill of reading in your lessons. Now, not every approach is going to work for every pupil, just as not every approach works for every subject. But it is down to your professional judgment really how you want to best approach those reading skills. So here are some top tips for teaching the reading skills to different classes. First of all, you do have to start with considering how reading works in your subject, how reading is taken in. Do you want pupils to be reading in your subject for simple knowledge, just being able to retrieve information from a text, or do you want them to have that deeper analysis skill? Do they need to have that deeper analysis skill in your subject? And if so, how are you going to model that to them? you'll find that each of these skills that we go through today, modelling is going to be a key part of it. I've also left at the bottom here, you can either Google these or I've sent you out the PowerPoint so you can hit the links. Disciplinary literacy in action in a couple of different schools, so you can see how different departments have worked that into their school settings. And like I said, Mr. Perry is going to take us through our own school's approach to literacy in next week's CPD. So if you are a member of staff that's coming back in September, then you'll be able to experience that one alongside the rest of us. Not forgetting as well that Mr. Perry is also running the team reader scheme for next year, and he is also running a few other bits and pieces out of the library. So if you're interested in reading in your subject and you'd like to be part of that new whole school initiative, give him a shout. So on to writing now. I think this is probably the trickiest of the three for some of us. A lot of us spend a lot of time trying to get our pupils to actually write things down. We'll start with another little snapshot of a lesson. Again, I'll give you a few seconds to pause the video, maybe read this experience of this teacher. So there are a few issues that this teacher has identified here in their PE lesson. First of all, some of these pupils might not have the word level knowledge, the vocabulary that they need in order to succeed in this task. And that's one particular challenge when it comes to writing. Secondly, some of them are struggling with how they actually approach the question. This goes back to the ability to read the question properly and know the difference between words like evaluation or words like analysis and what to actually do when you come across those words. And then lastly, this teacher is not confident that some of these pupils know how to plan and execute an extended answer. It's certainly something that we come across in English, is that shorter answers to questions are absolutely fine. But when you come across questions in exams that require essays or require any sort of extended response, sometimes our pupils can struggle. And there are many reasons for this, and this is potentially one of them, is that writing skills work every part of our working memory. You've got three different areas here: the composition, transcription, and executive function, which essentially mean that our pupils are working very hard when they're writing from word level and from literally just getting these words out onto the page with their handwriting, their spelling of those words, and then thinking about ideas, thinking about how they're going to form those words into sentences, and then keeping their whole plan in their heads as well. Now, we do have pupils that struggle with all three of those areas, and we have pupils that struggle with maybe one or two. And like it was with the reading skills, it's down to us as individual teachers to identify those gaps and to see where we can help those pupils make progress. Again, I go back to the curse of knowledge that James mentioned last week, is that we kind of take it for granted as teachers that we can spell and think about our next words or our next sentence at the same time. But some of our pupils can't do this, so they do need help with this. And the help here really comes from modelling. And we know that this is one of our key focuses for the coming half term. It's going to be learning principle. It's part of learning principle 2 on our new school framework. And in terms of effective modelling for writing, it's about verbalizing some of those thought processes that we go through at each stage. When we tackle a question, we know that we've got to go through some of that tier 2 vocabulary. We know that we need the key words for each question in our heads. We need to be clear on what we're doing before we start. And then once we've got that in place, we need to start constructing with the pupils, and again, talking through each stage of that at word level and sentence level and whole text level, being able to talk them through how to create a paragraph. What does a good paragraph look like in our subject area? Have we included everything that we need to in our success criteria? Just verbalizing that in the first instance is the first step along the route to success. And with that as well, when we answer especially extended essay style questions in English and in other subjects as well, being able to explicitly teach the skill of planning to pupils, whether it's mind mapping or it's just bullet points in a list or squares, things like that, whatever sort of planning system is right for your subject, being able to just verbalize that process, go through it with them and make sure that they're clear on what to do. Obviously after that, once they've had a go, giving pupils time to go back through their work and check off each bit of their success criteria, making sure they've included it in their work is a good way to reinforce some of those skills that you taught in the modelling phase. I always say to my pupils in year 10 at the minute, we're working on poetry essays, that after they finish writing, I want them to go back through their work and highlight every quote that they've used, highlight every instance of the poet's name where they've written their name, and highlight every method, things like simile and metaphor. Now you could take that into your own subject and think, what is the checklist for success that I need my pupils to know and to include in their writing, and what am I going to model for them before they begin? The final strand on our literacy adventure today is talk. Again, we'll start with a snapshot. I'll give you a few seconds to read it and then we'll discuss. Or I'll tell you, there's not much discussion going on here. So I think all teachers, regardless of age or experience in the classroom, all teachers feel this tension between the need to get pupils talking in order to develop their ideas and to bounce ideas off each other and things like that. But on the other hand, losing control of the classroom, maybe losing control of the discussion. We always fear for those kids who aren't really very verbal and wouldn't really contribute to a discussion. So how do we most appropriately manage those situations where we've got lots of different ranges of abilities of talkers in the same room? One of the things we can think about is this 3 strands of something called accountable talk. Now this essentially again comes down to good modelling, and it's about modelling your verbal communications this time rather than your written ones. Accountable talk comes in these 3 strands. So first of all, you've got to make sure that your students say something accurate. If you're having a discussion or a question and answer session in class and your students give an answer that isn't accurate, then you need to help them, perhaps breaking down the question or perhaps giving them extra steps in order to make sure that their answer was accurate. And Miss Watson, Gemma Watson in the English department, is doing some work on that for the next few weeks. If you'd like to join her, please send her an email. The next strand to accountable talk is reasoning, and that's after you've successfully scaffolded your learner to give an accurate answer, they then have to prove it. In English, this is all part of the point, evidence, explore framework that a lot of our paragraphs are built around, and we want that in our verbal responses as well. But being able to prove using the word because, using examples, justifications is the next way. And if we do that in our own speech as we're going through worked examples on the board, then it means that our pupils will be even more successful at that if they can see us do it as well. The third one in this, and I find this one the most difficult sometimes, is the ability to listen. I think we've started to crack this as a school with our focus on tracking across the classroom and how we've started to verbalize and make explicit that skill of sitting up straight, facing the person that is talking, making eye contact with the person that's talking, and all those sort of non-verbal cues like nodding to show that you're listening. Now we've started to do that in terms of listening to a teacher, and I think as part of our accountable talk and making literacy skills more successful within our pupils, we need to get them to do it to each other as well. So when a person is talking in the classroom, we turn to listen, we pay them the respect that they deserve, and we don't just sit facing the front of the room. So that's something you can think about in terms of talking. As I said before, each of these 3 strands of literacy, reading, writing, speaking, listening, they come down to effective modelling of those skills. We have to keep in mind the curse of knowledge at all times. We have to keep in mind the idea that some of our pupils simply haven't been explicitly taught the skill of appropriate listening, or the skill of being able to read for meaning, or the skill of being able to infer from a text. Now, we might take those skills for granted, but until we can make those implicit skills explicit for our younger learners, then they won't succeed. So we're ensuring that progress can occur by making these skills very explicit. I've dropped a link to some of the research and data that I've used in this presentation into the description of the video below. It comes from a 10 email series from the EEF, so you can sign up to that and get it drip fed into your inbox every week, or the link that I've provided actually gives you access to all 10 of the emails at the same time. And obviously, if you've got any questions about what I've said today, you'd like to discuss anything further or perhaps put a plan together for your own classes, please send me an email, tward@saltashcloud.net, and I will get back to you and we can have a chat. Thank you very much. Have a good day.